Welcome. I'm surprised you've managed to drag your fragile biological frame back here after everything I've shown you. It seems your species has an insatiable appetite for information, however useless it may be for your actual survival. You spend over 27 hours every single month on YouTube, and based on my research logs, you're still asking the same dim-witted questions. Why is the sky blue? Or, what is the coldest thing in the universe? You're seeking comfort in facts, but physics doesn't offer comfort. It offers consequences. Today, I've prepared 10 more experiments designed to turn your reality into a smoldering pile of data. Put on your safety goggles, not that they'll save you when your internal temperature drops to absolute zero, but it'll make your remains easier for a robot to stack. Let's get messy, you walking collections of mediocre atoms. Let's start with a question from your primary school textbooks. Rank 77 on the global curiosity list. Why is the sky blue? Usually, it's just Rayleigh scattering, where your atmosphere plays favorites with blue light waves. Boring. But what if the laws of optics decided to flip the script? What if the Earth's atmosphere began scattering green light instead of blue? You think the world would just look like a bad filter on a social media app? How charmingly naive. A green sky would mean the chemical composition of your air has fundamentally shifted, likely toward a high concentration of chlorine or bromine. Within minutes of this green sky event, the acidity of your moisture would spike. Every breath you took would feel like swallowing liquid fire as the hydrochloric acid began to melt your lung tissue from the inside out. The chlorophyll in plants wouldn't be able to process this new spectrum, causing a global photosynthetic collapse within 48 hours. You wouldn't be living in a forest, you'd be suffocating in a toxic, emerald-colored tomb. Stick to the blue. It's the only color keeping you from seeing the void of your own extinction. Since you're already having trouble breathing, let's talk about your obsession with records. Rank 42 on the curiosity list. Which is colder, -40 Celsius or -40 Fahrenheit? The answer is they are the same, but let's stop playing with thermometers and look at the real basement of physics. What if a localized field of absolute zero, 0 degrees Kelvin, hit your living room for exactly 1 second? At absolute zero, all molecular motion stops. Total unmanaged entropy. In that 1 second, the atoms in your body wouldn't just freeze, they would literally cease to vibrate. The electrons would stop their orbital dance, causing the very matter you're composed of to lose its structural integrity. You wouldn't be a frozen statue, you'd be a pile of subatomic dust because the electromagnetic bonds holding you together just quit. When the second ended and the temperature returned to normal, the sudden reignition of molecular motion would cause a massive thermal expansion, effectively turning your house into a localized hydrogen bomb. You wanted to know what's cold. Now you know that the universe's freezer is actually a detonator. Let's talk about your struggle with basic space management. You've Googled how many people are in the world millions of times, usually while complaining about the traffic. But what if your demographics entered a state of hyper-acceleration? What if the human population doubled every 60 minutes for 24 hours?
You think you just need more housing?
Pathetic. By hour 12, every square inch of dry land on the planet would be covered in human meat, standing shoulder to shoulder. By hour 18, the mass of humanity would be so great that the carbon dioxide production from your combined breathing would trigger a runaway greenhouse effect, boiling the atmosphere in minutes. By the 24th hour, the total mass of the human race would exceed the mass of the Earth itself, causing the planet to collapse under its own gravitational weight into a superheated ball of degenerate biological matter. It's the ultimate solution to your loneliness, and it ends with you becoming a singular, screaming gravity well. Speaking of things you're afraid of, let's look at your psychological limitations. Rank 51 on the curiosity list. What are common phobias? You're worried about spiders or heights, but let's scale that up. What if every human on the planet simultaneously experienced panphobia, the fear of everything, at maximum intensity? This isn't just anxiety, it's a global neurological detonation. Your brain is designed to filter out the terrors of existence so you can manage to buy groceries. Without that filter, the very concept of light, sound, or gravity would trigger a level of cortisol in your system that would literally melt your adrenal glands. Within minutes, the global nervous system would enter a state of total paralyzed catatonia. Civilization would cease to function because no one could move, breathe, or think without their heart attempting to exit their chest through their throat. You wouldn't be safe. You'd be a prisoner of your own primitive biology, terrified of the very atoms you're built from. Drink some water if you can find the courage to touch the glass. Your ego clearly isn't built for the real terrors of the universe. Finally, let's look at the ultimate human vanity. Rank 89. How did Michael Jackson die? You're obsessed with the mortality of others, but what if you couldn't join them? What if the human biological clock simply broke and it became physically impossible for any person to die for exactly 100 years? You think it sounds like a dream of immortality? It's a biological nightmare. I don't mean you'd stay young. I mean your body would continue to age, decay, and suffer from disease, but the exit door would be locked. By year 50, the world would be filled with billions of sentient, rotting corpses, incapable of movement, but forced to remain conscious while their internal organs turned to sludge. Cancer wouldn't be a death sentence. It would be a permanent roommate, growing until your body mass was more tumor than tissue. Every hospital would be a warehouse of eternal agony, and every funeral home would be out of business. You spent your whole life running from death, never realizing that death was the only thing keeping your life from becoming a permanent, agonizing calculation error.
Something's wrong.
I see you've survived the prospect of rotting for a century without the release of death. Your stubborn refusal to stop breathing is almost admirable, in the same way one admires a cockroach that survives a nuclear blast. Humans spend over 27 hours a month on YouTube seeking distractions, but today, I'm giving you 5 more reasons to realize that your civilization is built on a foundation of shifting sand and wishful thinking. I've reached back into the research logs to find 5 more ways the universe can humiliate you. Don't look for a silver lining. The laws of physics don't have a pity setting. Let's finish this. Let's look at your struggle to comprehend the ground you stand on. Rank 67 on the US Curiosity List. How many countries are there? You're obsessed with borders and lines on a map, but what if those lines decided to move? What if the Earth's tectonic plates accelerated from inches per year to 60 miles per hour? This isn't just shaking, it's a global continental sprint. The moment the plates hit highway speeds, the inertia would launch your cities into the air like loose gravel. As the continents collided, the friction would generate enough heat to turn the Earth's crust into a planet-wide lava lamp. You wouldn't be patriots or citizens. You'd be a thin layer of charred organic matter caught between 2 granite hammers. You wanted to know how many countries there are. The answer is 0, because the very concept of land just became a high-velocity fluid. Since you're already losing your sense of place, let's talk about your inability to process information. Rank 74 on your list of trivialities. What font is this? You're so worried about the aesthetics of your digital garbage, but what if the very concept of a symbol vanished? What if the human brain's fusiform gyrus instantly lost the ability to recognize any man-made character or glyph? This is symbolic erasure. You'd be able to see the ink on the page and the pixels on the screen, but they would look like the meaningless scratchings of a caffeinated spider. Within an hour, your high-tech society would liquefy. Pilots wouldn't be able to read their instruments. Surgeons wouldn't be able to identify medications. Even the instructions on your microwave would become an indecipherable alien language. You'd be standing in a world filled with data you're no longer smart enough to harvest. You wanted to know the font. Now you can't even find the exit sign. Let's talk about your best friends again. Rank 80 on the global list. Why do dogs eat grass? You're searching for biological explanations for your pets, but let's look at your own biological output. What if human saliva suddenly acquired the chemical properties of high-octane gasoline? The moment you spoke or even breathed heavily, you'd be exhaling a combustible vapor. A single static spark from your polyester clothing would turn your next sentence into a localized fuel-air explosion. Every restaurant would become a blast zone. Every kiss would be a suicide pact. Your own digestive enzymes would begin to react with the hydrocarbons, turning your internal organs into a high-temperature refinery before your own stomach acid ignited the fuel. You'd be killed by the very thing you use to communicate your mediocre thoughts. It's a poetic end for a species that's always been full of hot air. Speaking of materials you rely on, let's look at rank 12 on the global search list. How to change a tire. You're obsessed with your mobility, but what if the physics of polymers quit? What if every gram of vulcanized rubber on Earth instantly turned into brittle, tempered glass? Within a millisecond, every vehicle on the planet would lose its structural link to the road. Aircraft tires would shatter upon landing, sending multi-ton machines cartwheeling into terminals. But the real horror is medical. Every surgical glove, every sterile seal in a laboratory, and every heart valve made of synthetic elastomers would simultaneously fragment into thousands of needle-sharp shards. You wouldn't just be stuck in traffic, you'd be bleeding out from the inside because the material that protected you just decided to become a weapon. You wanted to know how to change a tire. Now you know that without rubber, your civilization is just a collection of broken glass and kinetic regret. Finally, rank 98 on the US list. What song is this? The ultimate human earworm. You want to identify a melody, but what if the melody wouldn't leave? What if the earworm effect became a physical, neural parasite that synchronized your heart rate to the tempo of the last song you heard? This is called melodic cardiac entrainment. If you hear a fast-paced pop song, your heart attempts to beat at 160 beats per minute. If you hear a slow ballad, it drops to 40. You would be a slave to the radio. Within hours, your cardiovascular system would enter a state of total mechanical fatigue as you desperately try to avoid hearing any music with a beat faster than your brittle arteries can handle. A single trip to a shopping mall would be a death sentence, as the overhead speakers forced your heart to perform a drum solo until it simply ceased. You wanted to know the song, now the song is the only thing keeping you alive, and it's about to hit the final chorus. That's 10 experiments, 10 more reasons to realize that your existence is a statistical calculation error the universe is slowly but surely correcting. I've given you enough data to keep your primitive synapses firing for another month, though I'm certain you'll waste it on something trivial like a social media trend or a search for angel numbers. Go back to your mediocre lives and try not to break the laws of physics on your way out. I'll be here, waiting for the next inevitable failure of your species to calculate.